We had a hearing a few weeks ago, first in this series on white supremacy and its growing role in the United States right now. And at this hearing, we discovered through expert witness testimony that not all of these incidents seem to be treated with the similar consistency. But we've also heard from experts that whether the FBI classifies extremist violence as, quote, domestic terrorism or a hate crime has major implications on resource allocation and prioritization within the Bureau. Mr. McGarity, the FBI considers preventing terrorism its #1 priority. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
And Mr. Shivers, what about civil rights violations, such as hate crimes? How do they rank among the FBI priorities?
Within the civil rights program, it is the #1 priority.
So within the civil rights program, but the FBI overall, doesn't it seem that FBI agents would have more of an incentive to pursue domestic terrorism cases over hate crime cases?
Well, again, sometimes those cases overlap. And so in a number of instances, you may have a civil rights investigation and a domestic terrorism investigation open.
And I do see here that the civil rights program policy instructs agents to open parallel terrorism investigations whenever a suspect of a hate crime has any nexus to a white supremacist group, correct?
Correct.
We've seen white supremacist attacks that were clearly domestic terrorism. Experts, in fact, the acting AG, Jeff Sessions, even called some of these incidents domestic terrorism incidents. The Emmanuel AME Church shooting of Black Americans in Charleston and the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh of Jewish people, those were only designated and charged as hate crimes, not domestic terrorist incidents. Mr. McGarity, why did the FBI not believe that these incidents were domestic terrorist incidents?
That's not correct. I don't know who told you that we didn't, but we certainly had cases open on them in both those cases, and I wasn't here for the Dylan Roof case, but it's certainly in our own Department of Justice Civil Rights about 3-4 weeks ago, and their testimony actually stated that it was a domestic terrorism event charged through the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice for a hate crime. I was here for the Tree of Life. I will tell you, I remember that day distinctly. It was worked as both a domestic terrorism case and a hate crimes case, and it still worked that way.
And so you are disputing that the AME, you're saying that AME was charged with domestic terrorism, Dylan Roof.
So you're using the word charge. So as I said before, there's no domestic terrorism charge like 18 U.S.C. 2339 A, B, C, D for a foreign terrorist organization. So what we do, both on the international terrorism side with homegrown violent extremists and domestic terrorists, we'll use any tool in the toolkit to arrest them, hopefully left of attack. Should it be after, likely that hate crime statute will come to play through the Civil Rights Division as a charge because it's a good federal charge for us to use in
And the
these
Tree
cases.
of
It
Life.
shouldn't be stated that it's not a domestic terrorism. In fact, on the record, it's stated it's a domestic terrorism.
And the same thing with the synagogue shooting?
Yes.
So okay, so we have two conflicting testimonies.
Well, I mean, I can go back to May 8th, 2019 from the Department of Justice. On the record, that statement called it domestic terrorism cases involving civil rights charges too, including some of the most serious attacks in recent years. Dylan Roof, African-American parishioners engaged at the Emmanuel African Methodist Church, James Field at the Unite to Right rally in Virginia, and then also Robert Bowers.
So that's the
All three
statement.
events were domestic terrorism.
But the actual charge, was the actual charge domestic terrorism?
You're not going to find an actual charge of domestic terrorism out there. If you look at Title 18, right? If you're looking for...
Well, it says here that, but at the San Bernardino shooting or the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, they were designated and charged as domestic terrorist incidents.
They were charged, I'd have to go back and look, they were charged likely with, if there was a connection to a foreign terrorist organization, it would likely fall under 18 U.S.C. 23 A or B.
So because the perpetrator was Muslim, doesn't it seem that because the perpetrator is Muslim,
That's not correct. That has nothing
that
to do,
the designation would
No.
say it's a foreign
No,
organization?
It's not correct. That is not correct.
Okay. Can you explain
Yeah.
why?
So, homegrown violent extremists, most of the people we arrest in the United States, homegrown violent extremists, self-radicalized, born in the U.S., Doesn't matter what religion.
But the Orlando Post Club shooter meets those qualifications, and you're
He was
implying.
worked as an international terrorist because he was following under the definition.
But he was
how we
homegrown
work
and
homegrown violent
self-radicalized.
extremist cases, how we work homegrown violent extremist cases under the global jihad. We worked under international terrorism. That is correct.
Is white supremacy not a global issue?
It is a global issue
So why are they not charged with foreign?
because the United
Terrorism.
States Congress doesn't have a statute for us for domestic terrorism like we do on a foreign terrorist organization like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab.
Could you see how this could create issues and discrepancies with how violent extremism by Muslim perpetrators could potentially, even if it's unintentional, but that there are holes and there are gaps here, not through your fault or any one specific person's fault. It could be our fault as Congress. But could you see how one could see how the way that we are pursuing and charging white supremacy, particularly if they tend to be charged with hate crimes and where that same type of violence committed by a Muslim extremist could be charged with domestic terrorism. Hate crimes and domestic terrorism are treated and charged, they're different crimes, and they could be pursued differently with different resource allocations. Can you see how people would say that these are being treated differently?
Some of the definitions we're using, I think we're talking past each other. But I will tell you from the domestic terrorism side and on the international terrorism side, on the domestic terrorism side, we don't charge, of those approximately 115 arrests we did last year, not all of them were hate crime charges. Okay. We're going to charge someone left of attack with any charge we have under Title 18 in the U.S. Code or a state and local charge. So predominantly, I would say I'd have to go back and look, most of them are not hate crime charges on the domestic terrorism side.
Okay. Thank you very much.